Welcome to Season 2 of In the Vine Dating Podcast with host Melissa Chavez, joined by Yesenia, Denise, and Shekinah. This season, we'll be discussing different topics such as premarital intercourse, soul ties, and the importance of servanthood. And of course, discussing our upcoming dating mixers and events. For more information, you can visit our website at www.inthevinedating.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to show your support and like, share, and subscribe.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to In the Vine Dating Podcast with your host, Melissa Chavez. And as you can see, my voice, or hear, my voice is struggling a bit, so bear with me. But anyway, here with me today I have
Yessie, Shekinah,
Denise.
And today we'll be discussing Gmamma's interview. But before we get into that, tell me about your weeks, ladies. I'll start counterclockwise today. Go ahead, Denise.
My week. It's been a crazy week. I know we sound like a broken record, but campaign season's almost over. So it's been crazy busy with just events and work, but it's been great. It's been good. It's been fun. I've been learning. It's really cool just to see what's happening in the community and being involved and, just knowing that you're making a change.
Yeah. And yesterday we did the March for Life.
Yes.
How was that?
It was awesome. We had a few hundred people show up. We raised over $25,000, I believe. We got to meet our new director. So things are totally moving in the right direction. We're definitely excited, and I'm excited just to see, what Karen is up to this year.
That's awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Shekinah?
This weekend was awesome. It was very busy, and then we did the campaign event, and In the Vine was there, and we got to meet so many incredible people. We got to interview people, got a lot of good footage. We got a lot of just meeting people, and that was fun. I also just took myself on a day on Saturday Friday, and I just took myself out to a random coffee shop I've never been to, went on a hike.
That looks so cool.
Dude,
the coffee shop.
It was such an unplanned day. Yeah, I think it's called Bodhi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but yeah, it's in Santa Clarita, and it was a nice spot, and it was just so unplanned. I just decided I'm going to work from there today. And then after I was done with work, I went on a hike, and then I took myself out to dinner, and it was just a great day. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it still didn't I still had a lot of work to do, but I got to do it. I got to weave my work into that day. So awesome. It ended up just being a blessing all the way around.
I love days like that.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
I love trying out new coffee shops.
Yes.
I think we've been there before, right?
But I don't know.
Yeah. We have.
I trust you.
I definitely had an eventful week. One of my biggest highlights was making some moves in my business. I started my banking for another DBA, and I actually am so happy because I got approved for a credit card under my business.
Nice.
First time.
Congrats.
Yeah. I don't have any credit cards myself after Dave Ramsey.
Good job.
But for my business, I'm like, I made it happen, So I'm
great.
excited.
Awesome.
That wasn't easy to do, but I finally found a way, and I finally found a bank for a small business,
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, and the Fit Fiesta yesterday, as you said, that was so much fun. With some of the clips that we're going to be posting on our Instagram. Dude, we were so caught off guard, especially, shout out to Gus. Shout out to Daniel and the other Daniel. Man, they were so funny. And of course, Manog and Justin. So stay tuned for those. We think you're going to really enjoy it. Okay, so back to Gmamma's interview. What did you ladies think about it? I'll start clockwise.
One of my favorite highlights was just talking about how she just didn't know any other option but just to keep going, because she could have stayed in those areas, of her being by herself, having to provide for her children. She could have even stayed at the shelter and took payouts, but like she hustled. Yeah. She hustled and she worked her way out of it, and like she said, she became a success story out of it. That was really amazing to hear.
I agree, 100%.
Oh my gosh. Can I just share like the impact that Gmamma's had on my life, in general? Oh my goodness. So as you mentioned in the interview, how she just shows up, and then by the time you realize it was Gmamma, she's already gone helping somebody else, She's just come into my rescue without me ever having to ask, without her ever knowing that I needed that. Just random things would show up at my door. Like literally she would ship things to my house.
When you were in Oklahoma, right?
Yeah, when I was in Oklahoma, and I was a student, and I had so many needs, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna like do this. I'm gonna, like one of the things was I really needed a computer. My old one had died. I didn't tell anybody though. I thought it was like the Lord's way of bringing me to the school library to, be around people and hang out with people. So I didn't complain. I didn't tell anybody I needed a computer. I just kind of took it as was, and next thing I know, I have a computer in a box at my door from Gmamma, and but she's been like that like throughout my whole life, and I know not just for me, for so many people.
Well, since you met her, relax.
Not my whole life. Yeah, you're right. For my whole time that I've known her. Yeah. Sorry, you're right. Thank you for correcting that. I haven't known her that long.
Gmamma's like, wait, what?
Wait, what? She's always been there, guys. She's an angel. Anything good that's ever happened to me, it's always been Gmamma. Anyway, so she's just incredible. But also, gosh, I was listening to the interview and I was trying to do my makeup and I couldn't. I just started crying. So, because Gmamma was actually the first person to know that I had filed for divorce, and I didn't tell her. Right? I went early morning to the courthouse, and I hadn't even told my mom yet. I was going over to the coffee shop my mom was running at the time, to tell my mom. And when I arrived, she was out walking her dog for his morning stroll, and so I just walked in. And as soon as I walked into the doors, I see Gmamma standing there in the middle of the restaurant with her arms open, tears streaming down her face. And I, without a word, just started blubbering. I fell into her arms. I started crying. I know. I was crying today thinking about it, so I'm trying to make it through this. But I was crying, and I was just in her arms, bawling my eyes. I couldn't get a word out because I was crying so hard. And she just kept saying, I know. The moment I saw you in the parking lot, my spirit knew, because I've been there. And she just kept saying, like, I know, I've been there. Like, I know, like, you don't even have to say a word, I know. And we both were in the middle of this restaurant crying, our eyes out, blubbering, and she was just like, I get it. Like, and as soon as my mom came in, she sees us just crying. And so that's when, I finally told them, I was at the courthouse this morning and I got the divorce papers, but it was just so surreal because I hadn't even told anybody yet.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I walked into the door, and as soon as I opened that door, she's bawling her eyes out, and she says, the moment I saw you, my spirit cried out for you because I've been there. Like, how amazing is our God?
Amen.
That she just looked at me. I wasn't crying. I was like holding myself together pretty well. As soon as I opened that door, though, she just grabbed me and started crying, and I was just like, how could you know that?
Yeah.
So she was the very first person to know that I went to the courthouse that day. She's the very first person to know that I was going through what I was going through, and I didn't have to say a word.
That's amazing. Because
her spirit she was there, and a lot of those same experiences, like, she shared with me, or not with me, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the impact that Gmamma's had on my life. And so yeah, during the interview, I was just crying.
Yeah, and that is who she is.
That's who she is.
There's oftentimes, as she said in the interview, that people don't have to tell her what to pray for. She just trusts in God and prays. And yeah, Denise?
Actually, that's what really stood out for me. And that's one thing that I've learned about my mother-in-law is her faith. And I love that. I've learned with her that just the way that she prays. One thing that I love about her is what you just said, Melissa, is that you don't need to tell her. She's not one that's like, I need to know your business. Like, you need to tell me so I know how to pray. Like, she is not like that. And I really believe that God honors her heart. Yes. And God honors that act of faith and that act of obedience, because just as Shekinah gave her testimony, I mean, there's so many, and even in our lives and other people around us, where she just shows up. Like, there's no way that she could know unless it's God. And for me, that type of faith is one that I want to glean on, want to learn from, want to be around, because there's just this peace. It's not like a competition. It's not like this controlness. It's just this beautiful relationship and dynamic between her and Jesus that is just like, wow, like, I want that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I love that.
I agree 100%.
That's beautiful.
With all that being said, there were a few things that I really want to draw out from her interview. There were so many things, right? But I'm going to keep it down to 3 points. So the first point that I would really like to draw out from her interview is the desire to go back to something that you need to walk away from. When she said that it got really hard and all that, and thank God for that intervention, right? What did you ladies think about that? I start with Shekinah.
Oh, I mean, in light of my situation,
You've never experienced
yeah, I've never
that.
experienced that before. No, honestly, walking away from something, I think, especially starting when that started out so good, is one of the most difficult things, and
Yes.
anybody who's lived life knows that. But yeah, wanting to go back because something's familiar, that's, even for me, that's a temptation, you know. Wanting the idea of, okay, but it was bad, sure, but it was good in these areas,
Yeah.
or at least it was a bad that I'm familiar with. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just we want what we're familiar with, and that's just how we are. It's our human nature.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's why, but I really appreciate her testimony. It's just, she listened to God, because there were those moments where she was just like, okay, I could go back. It would just make sense. It would just be easier. It would just, you know what I mean? Like, even if it was bad, it's a bad, I know. You know what I mean? And, but I love that she had the strength to just keep pushing forward and just go, no, I know God has something better for me. And that's why listening to God is so important in these situations, because there are times God will say, go back. And then there's times that God says, stay. And then there's times that God says, move forward.
Yeah.
And it's different for every individual. And that's why having people around you who are going to hold you accountable, and more than anything, having a relationship with God who leads and who directs is so important.
So I agree with you, but I agree with you
Yeah.
1,000%. But Gmamma's story is an anomaly, because she wasn't saved during that time. So for her, she wasn't necessarily hearing God's voice, is that she had no choice, right? Because then, you know, he moved in the other lady, and so it became a thing, right? So what the only reason why I'm bringing that up is because there's a lot of people who don't have that intimate relationship with God yet, that they can hear his voice yet.
Yeah.
And so then I really would like to speak to, how can they know God's will for their life when they're barely learning how to hear God's voice?
No, you're right. Thanks for reminding me of that. No, like she said, you have to know who you are.
Yeah.
You have to know who you are, and I think she was somebody who valued herself, and she saw her parents' marriage, and she was like, I don't want that for my life. So she knew that enough. She may have not known exactly who she was yet, but she knew what she didn't want,
Right.
and that was enough to drive her forward. So I think it's just identifying your goals, identifying who you are, what you want or what you don't want. Sometimes it can just be as simple as avoiding things. You might not know what you're going towards, but you know what to stay away from.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways that was kind of what helped her, was just identifying what she wanted for her life, for her kids' life,
Yes.
and being able to move forward with that. And that's such a testimony, again, for believers and non-believers, of know who you are and get started with that. And don't try to find your identity in somebody else, in this other relationship or whatever it is. Find your identity in you and what it is that you want for your life.
Yeah. And it's true. And, you know, for single moms, I think when they walk away from a bad situation, I mean, thankfully, I've never been in that situation, but I feel like one of the things that they constantly hear is, how can you do that to the kids? Like, stay for the kids. But what I love is that Gmamma left because of her kids. She didn't want them to see that, right? And see it any further. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to put words in her mouth. Yessie?
I think it's very unfortunate that people can choose to stay with people because it's familiar, but it's also when people say a dog always returns to its like vomit,
Oh, yeah,
or like
it's a
eats its own.
scripture.
Yeah, but
It's just crazy. The Bible's gangster.
yeah, and graphic. But it's just kind of sad because that it's unfortunately in our nature. Like, you're used to it, you're accustomed to it. You think that you may not be able to experience anything better, and then that's where her self-worth thankfully wasn't there, in the sense of I don't deserve better. I deserve this, you know. It wasn't that, and I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful that she was able to just see it was a dangerous situation, and we don't know what happened. She didn't go into much detail, but I do know that not everybody knows what happens behind closed doors, and even some people don't know what's happening within those closed doors when they're inside those doors. Like when she mentioned how her mother-in-law, at first was very upset, and then after was like, oh, girl, I understand now. Like, there's a girl in your house now. I thought that was pretty interesting to know that, yes, things can happen, and people don't know it until it actually happens, and then they understand. I'm glad she didn't stay because she's familiar. It makes sense now. until it comes to light.
Denise.
Two things I want to draw. One, just to kind of piggyback on the question, like now not everybody is saved, so how do you know, like not how do you know not to go back? But I think one of the biggest problems with nowadays is that we have so many choices. And so when you look at a situation, for example, with Mama Maria, going back wasn't a choice. It just wasn't. And I think that if people in situations realize that situation is no longer a choice, like you can't go back to it, even like if there's not another woman or male like that's moved in. But if you start to see that as it's not a choice, then you start working towards the next goal. So I think perspective change, a narrative change in your mind. And if you change the narrative in your mind, then you start feeding that narrative, and then you start to walk out in that new believed behavior. So that's, I think, one thing. But as you were talking, and I thought it was really powerful that what was highlighted was she didn't go back, right? And it reminded me when Mike was like, the old life was calling me back, but I didn't go back. And he was able to do that, I partly believe, because Gmamma broke that off in such a powerful way in her lineage of knowing, of having that authority. And because she is a praying woman, she's able to pray that into not only my husband, but even into our grandbabies, that when certain things try to call you back, like you can walk in that authority of not going back. So single moms, know that what you're doing, whether you realize it or not, is really going to affect your kids and your kids' kids, like generations. And that's one of the reasons why I love that we interviewed Gmamma, because there's such a full picture of what you can attain and what happens, the reciprocity of even when your kids are older, like the decisions that you make as kids with your kids as kids, how it really affects them and what that looks like once they're older.
Again, like as we mentioned in the interview, it's the long game. I completely agree. And so for those, even single people that may not be single parents, or, you're probably just going through like a bad breakup, or maybe it's not a bad breakup. You just know that it's not a thing for you anymore. I agree with what all of these ladies said. It really comes down to finding your value and your worth. And even because, not everything. I remember I used to follow this girl. She's a Christian. And she broke up with like a long-time boyfriend, and it was like, it looked like it was in the books for them to get married, but it turned out that it wasn't God's will. And so they had to make that mature decision to walk away from each other amicably. And that to me is also, one of those things where the familiarity draws you back, as Yessie was saying. But, you really have to take the time to cultivate God's plan for your life, whether you're not 100%, living in the fullness thereof, but understanding it's like, okay, where is God taking me and where am I at right now? And one thing that I've learned about the Lord is that you really have to just put your life in his hands, and the moment that you do that, I think the Lord gives you the grace and the strength to move forward. And so we're not saying it's easy. And I'm sure for Gmamma in that moment, it was hellish. And I'm sure that if, who knows, like sometimes God really shuts the door. And those are the most painful, where he's like, ready or not, baby girl, here we go. So, so pray about it. Pray to the Lord about that. Okay. So the next thing that I would like to draw out is dating passive men. Gross. See, I think about that story that you told me of that girl on that first date. I don't want to say who. You remember? Or no?
Yes.
So I just think about that. Do you want to say the story?
About the first date and how the woman had to pay for everything?
Yeah, everything.
And then the guy was watching the football game right behind her. And then while he was in the bathroom, he was texting her and saying, how's the game?
Oh my
God. It was their first date. And then not only this person had to pick that person up, the woman picked up the guy.
Was this a first date or an only date?
First date. It was their first date and only date,
okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But she's been redeemed.
It wasn't what that person expected, but yes, the Lord came through after. But it's just crazy how there's dates like that, and how a woman puts themselves in. She did not expect that to be her date. And just so you guys know, it's not me.
Yeah, and it's not me either. It's nobody at this table or in this room.
It's wild.
Yeah, so anyway, wait, did I put Okay, so what is the problem? What is the problem with dating a passive man? First, let's define it. What is a passive man? Who do one of you guys want to take that, or sure, just throw the ball?
Just throw the ball.
Throw the ball.
All right, I'm gonna send this to Denise.
She knew it.
I know. For me, a passive man is one that is afraid to speak up and doesn't speak up. And when they do speak up, it's not done in a respectful way. I think a passive man is one who doesn't like confrontation. I think a passive man is one who doesn't know their identity in Christ. I think a passive, or even just their identity of what it is to be a man. I think a passive man is one that will be nice but not kind. I think I can keep going.
Go up, sis.
Go.
I think a passive man doesn't know how to treat a woman. I mean, treat her with respect, treat her with dignity, treat her with like a queen.
Yeah.
And I think that a passive man will expect the woman to do everything, and he will not hold any responsibility nor accountability on his end.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you for summing that.
Yes.
So what is the problem with dating somebody like that?
They'll never be able to lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They won't.
Exactly, like ditto, like what you just said, right? Dating a passive man, I mean, you're putting yourself at risk of so many things. You're making yourself, you got to remember that what we understand as dating as Christian women is you're interviewing for marriage, essentially.
Yeah.
And so many women, again, we've mentioned, unfortunately, date potential, and they think, well, I can be that, because we hear these romantic stories of how the girl came into someone's life and it prompted him to, step up and be the man that he was really supposed to be the whole time, and he couldn't have done that without this amazing woman in his life, or he got cleaned up, or whatever it was, right? And we want to be that woman. We want to be that inspiration in a man's life. So it's almost like we romanticize this idea of finding a man who is potential, and we kind of purposely put that on ourselves, and go, I can be the hero in this story. I can be the one that changes him. He's going to change for me. It's going to be so romantic, but unfortunately that's not reality. No. And there are stories like that, but they're God-led. Anytime I do hear stories like that, it's always but the Lord actually showed up and actually made this happen. And unfortunately, we try to create these things to happen. So essentially, dating a passive man will lead you into this really dark place, honestly, and you become mom.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, you become mom. You become the one that's coach. You become the one that's raising him, and I'm trying to be your inspiration.
I like that when you said that in the last episode. When a man that doesn't have goals and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's really good. I like that.
A man doesn't have goals. They're more reactive than proactive. They're one of the big things is that they won't, like you were mentioning, they won't make things happen. They'll wait for things to happen, and they're not the ones that are going to be determined. And I also think it depends on the woman, because there's some women that, I don't know. I mean, it's not me, but they look for a passive man.
I love that you keep making sure they know.
Not me. Because if you're a strong woman, right? Like Denise said, a lioness, right? The last thing you need is a passive person. You'd walk all over them.
Yep.
Poor things.
And it'd be good at first because you're gonna get what you want.
Yeah.
You're gonna, and I love this because this is what Linda tells me. Yeah, in the beginning it might be fine and dandy because you're in control, but there's gonna come a time and place where you're worn out and tired, and you're gonna be like, why isn't he stepping up? And then you get resentful, but it's like that's who you married, So.
Yeah, and they don't stand up for things that you want them to stand up for, and you're gonna have to be the one that put up let's just say put up things around the house. And I mean, I still do it sometimes, but this minute my husband sees me, he goes and does it, But it just goes to show you that you don't want to be their mom. You don't want to be the one to always make these big things happen. And I also think that if someone is passive and like for myself, if you have a character of being like a go-getter and being very determined and dreaming big, your dreams are gonna be stagnant because you can only dream as big as they allow you to,
So
because they're the ones that are I think Denise and I had talked about it. our husbands do what they do so we can do what we can do.
Yeah.
You know? And we are at the position of that and freedom, and hopefully in the future even better opportunities.
Right.
But where they're at gives us that freedom and the opportunity because they've stepped into their place, right?
Yeah.
They haven't been passive, and they keep going for more, and that gives us the ability to go for more with them, right? To build with them. But if I have a passive man, I'm just going to be sitting here.
Yeah.
Pushing him.
Holding the weight.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And I do want to remind our listeners, I think I said this at least once in every episode in season 1, but we're women, so it's natural for us to talk to other women, but these roles can absolutely be reversed.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask. Like, what is the opposite of a passive man? Like, what is that trait in a woman? What would that look like?
I think the damsel
The damsel
in distress, absolutely. I
that's
think
really
there's
good.
men who are very attracted to the damsel in distress because it makes them feel like the hero. It makes them feel like the hero.
Yeah.
You know, like you have women who look at, you have the women on the women's perspective who want to date potential, but then a man's version of that, I think, is I want to date the woman I have to help and always needs me and that can't move forward without me and just, you know, needs me to rescue her.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the situation in those, and I've personally seen it all too often, is that men who date the damsel in distress end up marrying the damsel in distress and realizing, oh my gosh, this woman can't do anything for herself. And it's no longer this romantic thing. It's this, I actually need you to step up. Now I do. Like, you know, and unfortunately, well, that's what you married. That's what you chose. You married the damsel in distress. And unfortunately, I've seen men carrying the weight of these women who just want to be treated like a princess and don't want to do anything at all.
Yeah, or are always victimizing themselves.
Exactly.
Like, I've seen it in the way where, like, the woman is always, like, there's always some ailment going on with her. Like, there's always something broken, something, like, that's just not in the right position. And the man is always, like, trying to figure out what's going on, like, what's up, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yo, like, that's
hard.
That's tough, right? Because I've seen them as older, you know? And so then that to me, I was like, man, like, and please, I don't mean it in, like, I don't mean it in disdain. But I mean it in, like, man, like, that really sucks to have lived a lifetime with somebody like that, you know? Where it's like, you know, instead of thriving together, like, one of them had always needed to just be on their tippy toes trying to figure out what was going to happen next. And unfortunately, the person that's always around is the one that gets the brunt of it. And so that to me is really heartbreaking to see that dynamic in a relationship. Is there anything that you would like to?
Yeah, the woman is created to be the helper of the man, right? But if she's passive and not making those moves or not being able to help, like, he's only, again, vice versa, he's only going to get so far because where's his helper? His helper is weighing him down. His helper, he has to do more for her instead of building each other up together. And unfortunately, us women, we're the ones that are going to help when he doesn't even know he needs help, you know? And for her, someone that's passive, just, it's okay, God's got him, you know. And no offense to your sweater, but in the sense of
Talking smack about my sweater.
God got her.
I didn't want it to take out of context, but in the sense of, like, I'm not even gonna pray for this person because, you know, God knows what he needs, or I'm not even gonna fight for this because God knows.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, let's fight, let's work together, or hey, let me help you, or let me pray for you because you know what, you need this. The woman is there to help in all areas.
You know what I just got, if you identify with one or two of these things, I think the book of Proverbs in the Bible is such a wonderful book that teaches you how to be a successful human being. And so, you know, pick up a verse, pick up a chapter a day, and that'll really teach you how to be successful in life. You know, if you want to increase your discernment, if you want to increase your wisdom, that is the book to read. So make sure that you check that out, honestly, because how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so Proverbs really helps you set up that foundation on how to gain character, how to gain integrity, how to gain purpose, and how to have, like, that mind shift from somebody that's a victim, from somebody that puts themselves in situations that they shouldn't be in, and into somebody that can receive the crown of life. So I really wanted to throw that out there. And the book of Proverbs is such an easy read. I personally love it. I know that one of your favorite scriptures comes from that book. Okay, so the next one is seeing God as your husband. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to have Gmamma on the podcast was because of that, seeing God as your husband, you know, because she has, like you said, she has full authority in that. And so, but I think that seeing God as your husband doesn't end when you become married. I feel like it's something that does carry through marriage. And so, the way that I would like to approach this, obviously, is seeing it while single and then as married. So, I'm going to start off with Yessie.
Seeing God as your husband is crucial. I mean, during my singleness, it was something that I had to understand, because I know that God was loving and comforting and everything, but my physical dad, awesome as he is, like, you know, no one's perfect, so you obviously can't compare to like the most perfect God, right? So sometimes you would have to learn and understand that, man, God means this for me, or God is this person in my life. God is providing for me. God is always there. God is going to be there even if I mess up. He still loves me if I mess up. And I'm not saying our parents don't love us unconditionally, but I know that it's very different than the way that God loves us. So for you to experience that, it's gonna be life-changing. I would definitely say that. And then also not only knowing that, man, being single and having God as your husband, you've said it before, you are in the best position, because no one is going to treat you better than they are, right? And another thing is, when you're married, yes, you are going to bring that in, and sometimes you're going to have to remind even your own, like for myself, your own husband, like, hey babe, you know, have you even talked to God about that part? You know, God is a provider. God has came through for me in so many ways as my husband. Are you seeing him as your husband? And, you know, obviously that's weird. But just for them to see, like, hey, he's also my provider. He's also there to nurture me and comfort me. And you'll see the magnitude of his glory in that. In those
I love
areas.
that phrasing. Yeah. That was beautiful phrasing.
Thanks. I was stumbling my words for some reason. Oh my God.
No, that's really nice. Shekinah.
Yeah, honestly, recognizing God as my husband in my singleness carried me through my divorce, because even though I wasn't happy and I was angry, I still treated my husband as I would submit to God, if that makes sense. Like, I was able to continue serving my husband and serving him in a way that a wife should serve a husband, because I first had a relationship with God and I knew what that looked like. And in understanding God and in understanding the kind of husband God is, I was able to identify the areas of sin that I should not submit to when it came to what my husband was doing. And so I was able to continue serving my husband, loving him, being faithful to him, because I was first faithful to God in that way. And it carried me through those struggles. It carried me through those trials, because when I could recognize that even when my husband wasn't being a man of God, I was able to submit to God, and it didn't reflect on my relationship with God at all. You know, I didn't filter my image of God and my relationship with God through my husband. Thank God.
Right.
It was first I had a relationship with God, and I first saw him as my husband, and that was able to translate into my marriage, even in the struggles, because even if you don't have a marriage as bad as mine ended up turning out, you're still going to fight. You're still going to bicker. There's still going to be human beings, right? Yeah. And so if you don't look at your spouse through that lens of it's first God and then my spouse, you're going to translate your entire relationship with God through your relationship with your spouse. And human relationships are so unstable, which means your relationship with God's going to end up being unstable. So yeah, carrying that image from your singleness of God as my husband, not as a placeholder, not as until I get an actual husband, but carrying that throughout your life, and maintaining that structure and that relationship even through your marriage, and recognizing that that's your foundation, instead of, again, like, oh, you're my husband until I get a husband, you know. Like, there's a lot of women who do that, unfortunately, but I'm so glad that I didn't, and I maintained my relationship with God. And when my marriage fell apart, my relationship with God didn't. It didn't go with it.
Praise God. Denise?
I think I second all those sentiments. For me, seeing God as my husband during my marriage helps lessen the blows between my husband and I, in this sense is, you know, you go through so many different seasons and transitions. You know, for us, I was pregnant and had kids like would seem like for like 6 years in a row, because I was pregnant. And so there was so much change happening. And, there's only so much you can communicate in between feeding 10 kids and like trying to get yourself together hormonally as a female. Your hormones are all over the place. So when I say helps lessen the blows is before I went to my husband with an issue, I would go to God and I'm like, okay, God, I might be my hormones or whatever, but I feel like my husband's not meeting my needs in this area. Please help me meet those needs right now, or help me with those needs so that I don't become bitter, so that when I do relay the message to my physical husband, it's coming from a place of reconciliation and not a place of accusation. And so for me, that's what's helped lessen the blows, because I'm imperfect, my husband's imperfect, and there's seasons where we get busy, we get whatever. So to have my husband God as my husband, I see it as a mediator. You know what I mean? So he's able to fill in the gaps that my husband's not able to until I'm ready to talk to him about it. Awesome. And knowing when to talk to him about it. But it comes from a place of like, okay, I went to God. God is helping me through it. God is, mending my heart. God is filling in the void and filling in the gap so that I can come to you from a place of love and not from a place of anger.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a story that I know where the woman couldn't have kids. And it's a biblical story. She couldn't have kids, and she would go to God every year, right? She would be like crying out to the Lord, and even her husband would get frustrated with her, like, am I not better to you than 10 kids? And he would take care of her, like he really would. And then but she would cry out to the Lord, and the Lord remembered her and then was able to give her a baby. And so what I love about that is that although her husband loved her and protected her and provided for her, it was her ultimate husband, the one that gave her heart's desire in the depth that she desired, And so to me, that's beautiful, because God, of course, he was about her heart, but he was also about the husband's heart and able to bring him glory in that way as well. Yeah. And so, as a single woman, it can sound, I think, see God as your husband, blah, blah, blah. I love that, and I agree, and it's definitely a lesson that I'm learning continually. But at the same time, I think sometimes it gets really old to hear that. And so I want to talk about that, because I feel like a lot of people can hyper spiritualize what you're going through sometimes. And sometimes you just want to hear, man, like, that sucks that you're in this season, but it is the strength of your relationship with Christ that would get you through it sucks, And so whether you call him a husband, whether you call him your provider, whether you call him your healer, your salvation, at the end of the day, it's still the same God, and you still need to run to him in order for you to be able to produce life. And learning to know God is it's honestly the best thing that I imagine that you can bring to any marriage, because that is the helper, right? Adam and Eve, they were both in the garden, and they both had an intimate relationship with God, not one more than the other. They both walked with God. And so that is the best way that you can prepare yourself for any situation when it comes to life in general, but obviously with a husband. And I think, oftentimes we're like, how can I prepare? And at the end of the day is, we say this all the time, but finding your identity in Christ and diving deep into who Christ is. I feel like we've all read that quote where it says, I want to be so focused on God that when I look up, he's like, that's them. And so that's really what it is. And there's another quote that says, stand so close with God that another man would have to ask to cut in order for him to be able to be with you. And so that to me is the kind of intimacy that you should have with God, right? So that when that person comes, you're able to discern what the Lord is doing. And I love what Shekinah said earlier, about the damsel in distress and about the passive man. I think oftentimes we can get to a place where it didn't work out with somebody, right? And then you're like, well, I wanted to be that person for them, and that inspirational woman or that inspirational man. And you're like, and one thing that my mentor has taught me, where it's like, because you were that person for Andre, Denise was that person for Mike, and I think it's something that's supposed to happen, because there's things that that are not going to awaken in me until I find that person. And so I don't think that desire is necessarily bad, but it's like Shekinah said, it's not something that you have to force, because naturally when you two gravitate together, that person is going to automatically want to be better. You're not going to have to coach them. You're not going to have to mother them. You're not going to have to father them, which sounds weird, but it's a thing. They'll just want to be better for you without you even having to ask. One of my friends once told me that they used to tell their ex-boyfriend what to do, how they wanted it done, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a difference between communication, and there's a difference between training, I think. And so with that being said, that was kind of my closing statement. Do you ladies want to add anything to close those out?
I do. One of the things that I was listening to Mama Maria's, and that's what I'm really passionate about, telling single women, really see your God as your husband. And I think when I hear women say, well, I don't know how, or that doesn't work, it's really hard for me to have sympathy in that area, because I see people walk out in it. Yeah. And so I guess my call of action to you, and it goes back to what we said before, is if you're single and you don't know how to rely on God as your husband, find those that have, that are walking in it, so that you can grab onto their testimony. They can teach you the how to, and they can do it from a place of authority, that they're walking in it. Because there really is that level of impartation that they're able to teach you and show you. Because the only reason you're going to miss out on something like that is if you're choosing not to pull on those people that God has put around you. And I mean, if you're listening to it now, we just gave you a great tool, a great resources of a person that is fully walking in that type of authority that can show you how. And if there's anything that I know about Mama Maria, is that she would be more than willing and happy to grab you by the hands and show you what that looks like.
Yes.
Sorry. I was just going to say, make sure you take her cooking classes.
The next one is April 6th. So take the cooking class and then go bowling with us.
Yes. And ask her questions. If you don't have anyone around you that you know that has walked through it, I love that Denise mentioned Gmamma. She would teach you how to cook amazing food, and at the same time, make sure that she nourishes you with amazing information too. So
And I just want to say that it was you, actually, years ago, that instilled in me the desire to look at God as my husband, because I've always was able to look at him as father. That was never an issue for me. And it was you, and it randomly, God totally prompted you. And I was wanting to go deeper in my relationship with the Lord. I don't think you even knew that. We weren't like super close at this time, but I remember out of nowhere I got a text from you, and you sent me the song Wilderness. And you were like, I've just been praying for you, and this just came up in my heart, but I feel like God is really calling you to seek him as husband and not just father. And I remember that, and I thought it was so weird. And I literally looked up at God at that moment, and I was like, I don't know how to do that, because looking at you as father is easy because I have a good relationship with my dad. So it's easy for me to see that. And I was like, how can I view you as husband if I've never had a husband? And the Lord just was figured out. Like, I know it's such a weird answer, but honestly, it was such weird timing, because it wasn't something I was praying about specifically, and I didn't think that was something I needed to do. I honestly thought that was more for other people. I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't something I was seeking.
Because you weren't yearning for a husband.
I was happily single. I wasn't looking for a husband. So for her to be like, you need to look God as your husband, I'm like, I don't think I do. Like, I don't have an issue in that area. My relationship with God's just fine. Like, who are you?
Shekinah, there's like this pattern with you.
So arrogant. Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. But the Lord is good. He humbles.
Look at you, though. You can confess,
here. Yeah. I'm here. He humbles for sure. But yeah, I just wanted to say that you randomly prompting me to start looking into that, but I did take it seriously because I trusted you. And I knew that you were walking out with the Lord in a way that I really admired and really wanted to walk out in that same way. And when you said that, I was like, oh, okay. Well, if she's looking at God as her husband, as a single woman, I'll look into it. You know, I'll look into it. But I did. And I did. I started studying scripture, and I started hanging out with married couples, and I started seeing how godly couples lived out their marriages. And I was like, okay, I can see that. And the Proverbs are huge in that. There is so much wisdom. If you just, like Melissa said, the Proverbs are just literally like every verse is quotable. You know what I mean? Like, you don't...
I highlight the whole book.
Exactly. It's just like bullet pointed. Okay, here's just quick tips on how to be a better person. And it's also quick tips of just how to be submissive to your leaders, to the people around you, how to serve, it's an amazing book. So yeah, as Melissa said, check out Proverbs. And I'm not looking at Melissa right now because I'm going to cry.
I'm like, I'm bawling. And the reason for that is, it's crazy because that song, I haven't heard it in years. And this morning in prayer, the Lord reminded me of that song. And so what's crazy, and part of it's my voice, but what's crazy is that, like, you know, in the podcast, we've been talking about the planting, the sowing and reaping. And so what's crazy is, like, in this season, I feel like a lot of the seeds that I planted, like, years ago, I'm sowing them now. And what's crazy, it's like, you know, for single women, I feel like I've had conversations with a lot of single women recently, and a lot of them are just, like, so heartbroken. Like, they're waiting, you know? And so to me, like, that is such a promise revealed from God, right? Where it's just like, you know, that God really pays attention to those things. And I mean, I felt crazy sending you that too. I remember that specific time you were working at AMCO.
Yeah, yes, and I was actually walking in the wilderness.
I know.
I was like, you have such weird timing.
I know.
I was getting from one place to the other, and I was literally walking in the desert.
Yes. So with that being said, I just want to tell you guys, like, you know, and it's weird to use it in this context, but the word of God says, don't be deceived, the Lord is not mocked. And then there's also a scripture that says to go into the chambers of the Lord, right? And to have that secret time with him. And there's those things that, you know, you may be crying out to the Lord for that you haven't said anything to anybody about, but the Lord is faithful to reward. And so we just want to encourage you, like, don't give up, don't give in. I feel like so many people are on the edge of giving up, but that means that you're on the verge of breakthrough. So please stick through it, stay to the course, and you will see breakthrough. So we're praying for our single friends because we know that it's hard out here. Take care.
Peace.